severe fire danger ratings. And you put that on a backdrop of a drought-stricken landscape, as we've talked about now for a couple of months. Under severe conditions, you might see spot fires occurring 2 kilometres, 4 kilometres ahead of the main fire front. We've been seeing that occurring 6 and 12 kilometres ahead of the main fire fronts under those sorts of conditions. So it's not as bad as the catastrophic weather we had weeks ago, but it's certainly going to be another difficult day, particularly given the scale and complexity of these fires and their proximity to so much more built up and populated areas.
What are you concerned about dry lightning strikes from the new fires?
Look, that's a good point. We are expecting to see once again with the hot air dominating tomorrow, there will be a front moving through in the afternoon, and with that front moving through, the indications are for thunderstorm activities with that frontal movement, but not a lot of water in it, not a lot of moisture in it or rainfall, but that means a potential for lots of lightning. And we saw how deflating it was only a few weeks ago when lightning strikes were starting many new fires just outside of the edge of the containment lines of so many of the fires we had then. And in one day we went from having 40 fires to something like 160 fires. We're certainly hoping we don't see that figure again, but lightning and dry storms tomorrow afternoon right across a broad geographic area of the state could still be problematic.
What fire are you most concerned about tomorrow?
Oh, look, we're concerned about all of them, but if we were trying to narrow it down, we've got to look at the fires that are still pretty active. So right up north, the Tenterfield fire at the moment, it's at a watch and act alert level because it is influencing and impacting communities to the southeast of that fire, places like Pretty Valley. You've then got the north coast, Richmond Valley, Clarence Valley, still a lot of active fires up through there. You come right down the mid-coast areas, all your areas like Kempsey, Taree, Port Macquarie, there's still a lot of busy fire there. Closer to Sydney, of course, everywhere from Hunter, places like Muswellbrook, Singleton, down the back end of Cessnock, right through the western areas of the Central Coast, places like Wollombi, Laguna, Mangrove Mountain, Peats Ridge. There's a lot of potential for fires to head in the east of those main fire fronts, which is why so much backburning and containment work's been going on there. Of course, we've got the fire south of Katoomba in the Blue Mountains, the Ruins Castle fire. It's also very active, and despite the very best efforts, it continues to breach containment lines up there in the Blue Mountains, even under the conditions we've got at the moment. So, of course, we're concerned about that fire tomorrow. The fire complex just to the southwest of Sydney, burning through the catchment area and across the Warragamba Dam. Lots of burning, lots of containment work going on for communities in southwest Sydney, everywhere from Warragamba, Silverdale, right down through to Oakdale and places like Natai. A lot of work going on there, but again, that area and a little bit further south to the west of places like Thirlmere and Picton, under the sorts of weather conditions we're expecting tomorrow, and winds coming across the ranges. Even though I'm saying they're not as bad as we saw a few weeks ago, we're still talking the potential for 40, 50, 60 kilometre-hour winds, and under very hot conditions, that's going to provide for very dangerous, very difficult fireground conditions. So, and again, taking that further south, I'm also quite concerned about the fires down the south coast. The Currawang fire between Ulladulla and Bateman's Bay is still very active on the northern edge particularly, but also the fire problematic. So without being funny, all fires tomorrow are going to be of a concern to us, but there are some that are much closer and with great populated or highly populated areas. Thank you.
That was the latest from the RFS headquarters in Sydney ahead of dangerous fire conditions expected tomorrow and over the coming weekend. Hot, dry and windy conditions are forecast for tomorrow. More firefighters will be brought in to help combat those conditions, we were told. It's going to give us a taste of what we're going to experience over the next few months of summer. That was what the New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian said. Now, as everyone braces for more days of extreme heat over the summer, national and international experts on urban design are meeting in Adelaide today to try and work out how to build cooler cities. Here's Professor Alan Peters from Adelaide University. Hi there, Alan. Thanks so much for waiting. Now, how much higher can temperatures be in cities compared to open areas?
Actually, quite a bit. It's highly variable depending on where you are and how, the climatic patterns around you. So you can't give a very simple answer to that question. It's highly variable. That's the best thing I could say.
So what influences higher temperatures then in urban areas?
Well, there's the basic climatic conditions, but of course global warming means that those conditions interact with greater levels of heat. In Sydney, for instance, the predictions are that global warming will mean that the onshore winds, which usually provide the cooling for Sydney after a big heat event, will become much lighter indeed. So the predictions are, for instance, that particularly in the west, you're going to see fairly dramatic increases in temperature over the next few decades as a result of that. So it's basically a combination of global warming interacting with local climatic conditions.
And can there be big differences in temperature between different parts of a city, almost from street to street, depending on the buildings that are on those streets?
The buildings matter a lot, not only the buildings, how much shade you have, how much greening you have. Cars are also unbelievably warm, so if you've got lots of cars in a street, it can really add to the felt experience of temperature. And there are a number of other things that really influence the way you experience the temperature on a particular street, including, for instance, the angle towards the prevailing winds. So there are a number of things that are driving your experience of temperature, and it's deeply, deeply localized. You can have 5, sometimes even more than that, degree differences, very, very close to each other.
So how can design then help to keep temperatures in cities at more comfortable levels?
So a lot of work has been done over a long period of time. The obvious strategy is greening as much as possible. Planting trees, providing shade. Greening also provides for transpiration, which actually lowers temperature a fair bit. But in and of itself, it's not really going to do the full job, because 36 degrees, 37 degrees. So you need other strategies besides greening, I think, to control the experience of heat in urban areas.
Such as, what are those other strategies?
It's partly the advances all over the place. Let me give you an example of one that I think is particularly interesting for Australia. There are materials that allow you to turn black surfaces into behaving like much lighter surfaces, so they reflect heat. So in other words, you can use what we usually do in urban areas, lots of dark materials on sidewalks and so on, and make them perform much better in terms of heat. There are also fairly significant advances in glazing and other sorts of materials that again help to mitigate the impact of localized heat in urban areas. And of course, the story is that buildings themselves can become considerably more efficient, largely in the way we use air conditioning, the way we use lighting, and the integration of green. So it's not just one sort of strategy.
Just more on that, particularly within buildings, how can you keep internal spaces cooler without relying completely on air conditioning?
So partly it's a behavioural thing. It turns out there's actually quite a bit of research on this going on at the University of Sydney. Partly it's the way we experience heat. The body reacts to absolute temperatures, but it also reacts to changes in temperatures. So if you can control air conditioning in such a way to allow movement essentially up and down, you can in fact get people to accept much less air conditioning than they otherwise would want. Obviously, there are design things that can be done as well to allow much greater use of passive cooling, that is essentially using the design of buildings to result in coolness in winter and warmth in summer. Coolness in summer and warmth in winter. But so it's a combination both of changing people's behaviour and understanding how they behave, and then controlling air conditioning and so on in such a way that you can use less energy, be more efficient, but still make sure that people feel okay.
You mentioned Sydney on this point a little earlier, but generally, how quickly do cities cool down after a heat wave or after a day of extreme temperatures?
So in places like Adelaide, which is unlike Sydney, it's been fairly cool this early summer. We are used to days, we're used to weeks of temperature well into the 30s and 40s. So what you will find is that it takes a very long time to cool down after episodes like that. In Sydney, the typical pattern has been traditionally that you would have one day well above, well above the rest, 40-something degrees. And then you'd have the southerly buster coming in. What we expect, though, is that those southerly busters are going to be less effective in cooling down places like, say, Western Sydney, for the reasons that I said at the beginning of this interview.
All right, Professor Alan Peters, thank you.
Thank you.
The Australian public's trust in government has reached an historic low, according to a new report from the ANU. The survey also identified a number of trends that helped the coalition to victory at the May election. Here's Theo Skanovsky from the ANU on how the survey was carried out.
Well, we've been doing this survey since the 80s, and as a result, we have a really good long-term look at how the public attitudes, political attitudes of the Australian electorate have changed over time. So, as a result of the rigorous statistical method, compared to some other pollsters, we have a pretty good look.
Okay, so you found that satisfaction with democracy is at a record low. So what are the figures and why are voters so disenchanted?
Yeah, that's right. Satisfaction with democracy is lower than it's been since the constitutional crisis of the 1970s. And political trust is also at a record low. Since we've been measuring it, it has never been as low as it is now. So at the moment, only 25% of Australian voters think that people in government can be trusted, whereas 75% think they're mainly looking out for themselves. And, you see these sorts of trends mirrored all around the Australian electorate, lots of segments of the Australian electorate, not just one. And you have 56% of people, for example, think that the government is run for the benefit of few big interests, whereas only 15% think it's run for the benefit of all.
When was satisfaction at its highest here?
Satisfaction was at the highest in 2007, actually, so during the Kevin Rudd run. So it hasn't been, it's been falling ever since. It was about 85% then, and now it's around 59%.
Okay. So what did you find out about the popularity of the current political leaders, or the ones certainly who were in power at the time of the last election?
Right, so you have a pretty big gap in popularity between Bill Shorten and Scott Morrison. Scott Morrison is actually very popular as far as leaders go, as popular as Kevin Rudd was in 2007, whereas Bill Shorten was very unpopular, one of the most unpopular leaders since we began the survey, and that definitely helped the coalition. We also survey based on a number of attributes, so how competent, how trustworthy, how inspiring leaders are, and Scott Morrison outperformed Bill Shorten on all those metrics.
Voters were also, you found, particularly polarised during this last election. How were those lines drawn?
That's right. So the electorate's getting polarised on a whole range of gaps. So there's a gap between men and women, a gap between the old and the young, the well-off and the less well-off. There's even gaps based on share ownership, so homeowners versus renters, those who own shares, who don't own shares. We're really starting to see gaps in a lot of the Australian electorate.
One in particular, Theo, were the issues and the trends in the last election that gave victory to the coalition. That's
right. So in the last election, a lot of voters voted based on the policy issues, the high 60s, and I think it was over 60% voted based on the policy issues. And the number one policy issue that mattered the most was the economy. Now, the economy really favors the Liberal Party based on issue ownership and who voters think does a better job at it. And because of how focused the last election was on the economy, that certainly benefited the coalition. The other really notable trend is that 1 in 5 voters, the highest ever, thought that climate change or the environment was the most important issue, and that was what determined their vote. But more voters changed from Labour to the coalition based on the economy than did the other way around based on the environment and climate change.
The survey also found changes in the way people consume information about elections, big changes there.
That's right. For the first time ever, more people are getting their news from the internet and online than any other news source, which, if you're reading a reputable news source is all well and good, it means that news are more available and people can get political information on demand. However, as you know, there's also the rise in fake news throughout the world, and it's getting harder and harder to tell apart good sources from bad.
Theo Skanovsky, thank you. Finland is set to have its youngest ever Prime Minister. Sanna Marin is 34 years old and has been a Member of Parliament since 2015. Most recently, she's been Finland's Transport Minister. Her elevation to the top job by the Social Democrats Party follows the decision by Antti Rinne to step down after a key coalition partner withdrew its support, citing lack of trust in his leadership. The man who was the voice for Sesame Street characters Big Bird and Oscar the Grouch has died at the age of 85. Carol Spinney gave his voice to the beloved characters since 1969 before to the puppeteer. The Sesame Workshop said he lived for some time with dystonia, which causes involuntary muscle contractions. Now to a story of how thousands of people from more than 100 countries saved a French castle, and with it some Christmas joy. After 2 years of restoration work, those that helped restore the chateau have come together to celebrate at the castle's Christmas ball. Anthony Furci has more.
It was the castle which time forgot. With branches poking through its windows, mossy rocks in the garden and doors leading to nowhere, the Meurthe Chandonnier castle had fallen into ruin. A fire ripped through the building in 1932, destroying much of the structure and leaving it uninhabitable. 2 years ago, a crowdfunding project was launched to try and save the castle.
It's the romantic ruin, I think, that it has become, and it has a very interesting history, obviously to the property having burnt down, I think, in the 1930s, and left to nature.
The 13th century castle was captured by the English during the Middle Ages. Later, the grounds were turned into grand gardens, while the building was renovated in neo-Gothic style.
It's lovely to be part of the heritage and be able to become involved with the history of the area and the history of France, which is obviously fascinating, and for an Englishman it's very tied up with English history.
The initial call-out saw 25,000 people join the project from 108 countries, all pitching in a minimum of €50, which easily exceeded the initial €500,000 target to buy the castle from its previous owner.
When I was a little boy, I was fascinated by castles, and now to become a co-owner, it's, wow, overwhelming.
Now the hard work is starting to pay off. The foundations have been restored, and the castle has been decorated to celebrate the festive season.
My sweetheart offered me a beautiful part of the castle for my birthday, and then we came and discovered for the first time the work being done on it. We embarked on an adventure. We've met many people. Then you have this beautiful castle over there. It's about enjoying the company. I think it's amazing.
And while the restoration work will go on, the Christmas celebrations are a chance for the people who've bought a slice of history to revel in the castle's regal glory. Anthony Furci, ABC News.
Time to check the weather now. Here's Nate Byrne.
We've got cloud associated with a cold front and a trough that's driving hot, gusty northerlies ahead of that system. Behind it, a cooler change. Moving through the last of South Australia today. It'll start moving through Victoria later, but not before temperatures get well into the 40s, particularly in the north of the state, and the fire danger is following suit with extreme conditions on the forecast. Lots of heat in the north as well. Unfortunately, we don't have much rainfall. A little bit for the tropics. We'll see the odd storm associated with that change moving through, but not much in terms of rainfall totals. That picture will continue as we move into tomorrow. The wet weather just starting to move up the east coast. Again, very isolated in terms of rainfall totals. We will see the odd thunderstorm as well, though. Things continuing in the tropics, so some good news there if you've been waiting for some relief from the heat. Not everyone is going to get that relief though, as heat pushes northwards, those southerlies driving it well up into Queensland and through New South Wales as well. A very dangerous day tomorrow with severe fire danger returning to the east of New South Wales. We've still got plenty of smoke around as well. Brisbane should see some early smoke haze, then a mostly sunny 32 degrees. Smoky again for Sydney as well. It's becoming windy, getting to 36. And Canberra, you will be hot, 38. Some smoke in the air for you as well. For Melbourne, after today, wow, what a change. Only 19 degrees, a cloudy one there. 21 for Hobart, possibly an early shower. Some cloud clearing in Adelaide, it's getting to 26. It'll be 34 in Perth. And Darwin, a possible shower or storm, top of 35.
SpaceX's Dragon spacecraft has successfully docked at the International Space Station. Dragon arrived at the ISS early after blasting off from Florida's Cape Canaveral 3 days ago. The spacecraft is on a resupply mission, delivering critical equipment and material. And among the supplies, a beer malting experiment looking at how barley germinates in microgravity, and some festive treats for the 3 Americans, 2 Russians and 1 Italian stationed there over Christmas. That's ABC News for now. I'm Ros Childs. Coming up on the ABC News channel, New South Wales police make a global plea for help tracking down a man accused of historical child sex offences. And we head to Bustleton Jetty in WA, where the world's first electromagnetic shark curtain is being installed today. Thanks for joining us.
Grandstand Summer of Cricket is here. Called by the best in business. They'll bring you all the action from the men's test series against Pakistan and New Zealand. Plus, all the big hits from the WBBL. Grandstand Summer of Cricket, live on ABC Radio and the Listen app. Daytime, nighttime, anytime. You'll be summertime streaming on iView. iView's available on your smart TV, PC, tablet or phone.
You wouldn't be there for quiz.
With complete, critically acclaimed dramas, comedies and award-winning entertainment. Summertime streaming, now on iView.
It's the last Q&A of the year.
Why are we selling water to make profit?
And the era.
I am not the problem.
Are you listening?
Oh, no.
Watching, relax. He wants the government to step up on climate. He's trying to kickstart Labor. And this daughter of a freedom fighter offers new perspectives on race and politics. They join Indigenous leader Pat Turner and Nobel Prize winner Brian Schmidt. Q&A, tonight 9:35 on ABC and iView.
Get the latest news whenever you want, wherever you are with ABC News. Top stories from your state, Australia and around the world. Plus, get the latest breaking news with live notifications and information in the event of an emergency. Go to news.abc.net.au or download the ABC News app.
Just dived straight in and the shark got me.
Never been to a shark attack before?
A heroic rescue.
Was I thinking about the shark? No.
I knew that I just had to stay calm.
And a remarkable recovery.
I'm stronger than I know.
Avoid asking why did it happen.
Australian Story, tonight on ABC and iView.
Today, a global manhunt underway for a cybersecurity expert wanted over historical child sex offences police say were committed in Sydney. Chief Commissioner Graham Ashton denies accusations Victoria Police tried to cover up its extensive use of Nicola Gobbo as a gangland informant. Fire crews in New South Wales carry out backburning ahead of another difficult day of extreme heat and strong winds.
We know tomorrow is a very dangerous day for New South Wales.
And energy customers power bills over the next 3 years. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Ros Childs. New South Wales Police have called for a global effort to find a man accused of historical sex offences in Sydney during the 1980s. It's alleged the 63-year-old operated a refuge for homeless children, which allowed others to prey on them. Reporter Lara Hyams has more.
The person at the centre of this international manhunt is 63-year-old tech expert Simon Davies. New South Wales Police allege that he was responsible for a string of historical child sex offences in the 1980s. Specifically, they say that he was responsible for 18 offences dating from 1981 until 1987. The ABC has confirmed that New South Wales Police have spent several years investigating these allegations and say that he was operating a refuge for homeless children in Sydney.
These people are sick people. They're very ill. That should be hung. destroying a kid's start. Very sad.
International police agencies, including Interpol. They're focusing their investigation around the United Kingdom.
I'm at Rusidov. Good night, people. I mean, good day. It's 2 o'clock. What date is it? Already 9th of the 12th, 2019. This is going on YouTube and everywhere else. Good night.